Okay, great. So welcome everybody for joining us for our session today. One of the main aims of today is for you to be able to connect with each other as well. So thank you for introducing yourselves to the chat box. Please do so if you haven't done already. We're going to be going through today's topic. So each time we host these sessions, every couple of weeks, we change the topic. And what I'll do is I'll be giving you a short, brief presentation about the topic, some insight, some food for thought, some tips that you can take away. I'll then create some small breakout rooms, sort of in threes, I imagine, threes and fours, to have a chat, to build on the connections that we've made, and then we'll have a wider group discussion. I'll also be spending some time online afterwards if you want to ask me any questions. I do know as well that diversity and inclusion is a topic that can feel quite daunting and uncomfortable for some people. So if you'd much rather ask me the question privately in the chat box, if you want to drop me a message on LinkedIn or via email afterwards, you're more than welcome to do that. And we'll encourage you and give you some details on what's happening in the next session because we'd love to have you there. So a fun fact, after today, I am actually later this evening getting in the car and driving to France because I'm getting married soon. So this is my last day online for a couple of weeks now. And I think this is a very nice way to sign this off before I go off on a bit of adventure. One of the things that I hear the most when working in diversity and inclusion is that, oh, it's that thing for HR. And I would say that is a bit of an old school way of approaching EDI. And it's something that we encourage at Mildon, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is seen as everybody's responsibility. I really like to lean in on the I, like including everybody, bringing more people into the conversation and moving away from the idea that, oh, it's that HR thing. There's loads of different issues with assigning EDI to just being that thing for HR, and we've got a few of them listed here on the screen. So when we talk about lack of strategic influence, what we mean is that when diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't in the boardroom, it's disconnected from the core business strategy. It's something that's reactive, not proactive. So we might be hosting an event, for example, and right at the end, just before we're about to host, we're wrapping up the plans. Oh, let's think about EDI, let's put an EDI lens. And it's kind of think of it a bit like a backpack sometimes, rather than it being embedded in a core part of the business strategy. Then we have resource starvation. So diversity, equity, inclusion is often having to fight for budget, which is a real challenge, and it's having to fight for attention against other business critical priorities. So yeah, it's important, but these are the things that are just far more important to us right now. When it's seen as only HR's thing or HR's responsibility, you can imagine that creates a huge burden on HR. It creates really unfair and unrealistic burdens on them for one person or a small team of people to single-handedly transform an entire organization's culture. There's also a lack of accountability there when it is seen as just HR's responsibility. So it allows other leaders to think, oh, that's not my job. That's not the thing that I do. Diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't for me, isn't about me. It's that thing for HR or that thing for the EDI manager. Does anybody relate to this on the call, the feeling like this? Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up there. It's something that we hear a lot. We work with lots of different organisations of different sizes, different sectors, different stages of the diversity inclusion journey. And this is one of the biggest challenges we see with diversity inclusion. I would say on a par with just that fear of people saying the wrong thing, the fear to get involved in the conversation. What else we see when it's seen as just the HR thing or EDI being that HR only model is strategic liability as well, because we actually miss out on so many opportunities. And truly, every department has a role to play when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Take marketing and sales, for example. If we're not connecting with diverse customers, we're missing out on big opportunities there. If our sales and marketing team aren't understanding the diverse customer base, There's also supply chain and procurement. People might think, oh, what's their role and responsibility when it comes to EDI? What's their part to play? But if they're not helping to build a resilient and innovative supply chain, if they're not engaging with diverse suppliers, that potentially could lead to more creative problem solving, creative pricing. And we also really want a supply chain that represents our customer base too. We can then go down the product development and the R&D side of things and think about their responsibility and their involvement when it comes to diversity inclusion. Are they actually designing products and services for everybody? Are they bringing in diverse perspectives at the design stage? And are they actually creating products with biases that aren't excluding potential customers and users? And then our IT teams, facilities management, are they creating environments where everybody can do their best work? Are they creating truly accessible and inclusive physical, but also psychologically safe workplaces as well? So these are why just some of the ideas there and just some of the departments we might have need to be involved in the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. So what we actually need is a strategic shift or a way of thinking about EDI which involves a leader-led approach. We move from that kind of old school HR model into leaders leading the way when it comes to diversity inclusion. Toby has written two really great books, all about diversity inclusion. And one of the quotes I remember in his second book is he describes leaders as the custodians of culture. And it's true, what matters to the leaders, what's important to them, what behaviours they show, ripples into all parts of the business. So if they're able to own, lean into diversity and inclusion, and communicate in a way that they say, this is important to me, it ripples to other parts of the business as well. And it feels like something that is important to the organisation and important to others too. And what some of the things we can expect to see if we move to this model of the leader-led diversity, equity, and inclusion is sharper decision making. So there are so many stats which you can Google that show diverse leadership are proven to make better, more robust decisions because they challenge groupthink. I host a monthly session called EDI Connect, where you're all invited to. It's a free online session run through Mildon, and it's a space for people to come and connect if they're passionate about diversity inclusion. And somebody called Chris shared an idea with me that really shows this decision making in practice. And you can take this and use it. I think it's a fabulous idea. So often before he's doing a workshop, sometimes diversity inclusion workshops, he will spend 5 minutes doing an icebreaker. Not the traditional two truths, one lie, or tell me an interesting fact. He will put people into groups and he will give them a piece of paper and some paper clips. And we'll give them each, let's say, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Who can build the tallest tower? So that's the challenge. With your paper and paper clips in your small groups, who can bring the tallest tower? And you can imagine there's lots of very creative ways people use these paper and paper clips. And at the end of the 5 minutes, he asks people to look around and just look and see how they each approach the different problem, how they each approach creating this tower. And we can really see there why we need to move from that groupthink and have diverse thoughts, especially when we're problem solving or coming up with new ideas. We also know that when we move to leader-led diversity and inclusion, we're going to see better performance and more innovation. When people feel like they belong, they're more engaged, they're more creative, and they're more productive. So this isn't just a feeling that people have. Diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't this nice feeling. It translates directly to the bottom line. We also see stronger governance and risk management. So when we have a culture that is inclusive, one that builds psychological safety, people are more likely to speak up about issues and they were able to see problems before they escalate and fix them at the source. But that's only if people feel safe to talk and speak up. And we're also able to build more trust. So your customers, your investors, your employees, having trust is key. And a genuine commitment to EDI championed by our senior leaders is a really powerful trust builder. Hi, Lucy. Welcome. I can see someone else has just joined us here. Sorry, I'm slurping there. I'm trying to, you can just hear I've got a bit of a sore throat at the minute. So we're really passionate about this leader-led EDI approach. So what is the catalyst to get senior leadership teams involved? How do we actually do that? And this is where we bring in one of our favorite people here is Simon Sinek. You might recognize this person. He's a famous author. If you see him on a podcast, I'll recommend listening to it because he's a really, really great speaker. And he has a famous saying. We've tweaked it slightly just to make it relevant for today. But people don't buy into blank, you do. They buy into blank, you do it. Now, I want to hear from you. Feel free to unmute yourself or pop in the chat box. What words do we think are in the blanks there? People don't buy into you do, they buy into you do it. What do you think those words are?
Hi, Brooklyn. It's Victoria.
Hi,
So,
Victoria.
my take on this is that people don't buy into businesses, they buy into people.
Okay. Have you heard that phrase before?
Um, I th I think so because I'm a big fan of Simon as well.
Mm,
But it is also something that I think is absolutely true,
yeah.
and I've seen it. I'm an ex-chief operations officer, and I've seen it so many times
Mm,
in terms of dealing with clients who've got very particular issues that they will trust can be built quite quickly with people as opposed to just offering them something about the business.
mm. Yeah, definitely. And there's that stat, isn't there, Victoria? There's quite a few stats when you're looking at why people leave organizations. It's often due to relationships with their line manager.
100%. Yeah, people don't leave businesses, they leave managers.
That's it. That was the phrase I was looking for there.
Definitely
Thanks.
remember that one.
Thanks, Victoria. It's a
It's
really good
fine.
guess. It's slightly different. I think it could be we could go down a few layers. Hi, it's nice to see your face, Victoria. And it's similar here. So people don't buy into what you do, they buy
Ah,
into why you do it.
okay. Yeah, I like that. That's a good one.
Oh, who's your cat? I've got
So
some.
this is Wilfred, by the way, and and his pronouns are thingy because he's definitely very annoying today.
Hi, Wilfred. So cute. My cat might come in and say hello. I have one called Sheila and one called Reggie, but they're sleeping currently, so we'll keep them there for now because
Yeah,
they're quite vocal. So we really like this phrase, and we often will reference this when we're doing workshops at Mildon. But it's that people don't buy into what you do, they buy into why you do it. But what does this mean, sort of practically? Lots of organizations, when they're thinking about diversity and inclusion, they start on the outside. That's okay. We've got this diversity inclusion thing. What do we need to do? How do we do it? Instead of actually starting here, right in the middle, what ends up happening is when we're focused on the what, we they're focused on sort of what they're doing. So all of those EDI initiatives, but that's when we move into that performative box ticking exercise. I mentioned to you at the start that I love to create diversity inclusion content. And one of the main reasons I love to do that is because there's so many myths and misconceptions around diversity and inclusion. In fact, the people who are anti-diversity inclusion who find me on TikTok, they will often say that it feels performative, it feels box ticky. And I can see why people might say that for sure. That's why it's really important that what we do feels authentic and we move away from box ticking EDI, things that maybe look good but have no substance. So a great example of that is your organization might say, one of the things we're going to do, the what here, hopefully you can see my cursor, is we're going to sponsor Pride. We're going to sponsor Pride this year. But they're not actually addressing the issues that LGBTQA plus individuals might be facing in the organization. They might be sponsoring Pride, but does their data tell us that 90% of their LGBTQI plus staff are going to be leaving the organization in the next 6 months? So these things can feel very performative. I think of it on an individual level, something like sharing a black square, for example, but that's where your allyship stops. So it's doing things that don't really shift the dial. And a great way we can move from that performative diversity inclusion, move away from that box ticking and bring our leaders in is by figuring out our why. And often our organisation might have a why diversity and inclusion is really important to Mildon, for example, of one of our clients. But I think a really powerful thing to do is for individuals to figure out their own why, because that organisational why can feel quite far-reaching and it's not specific enough. And one of Simon Sinek's activities that he recommends in this book, Start With Why, is called the 5 Whys exercise. It's really, really simple. You end up just asking yourself why 5 times. And how we recommend that you use this with your leaders or even do it on a self-reflection as well is start by asking yourself a very, very simple question. So, why is a culture of inclusion important to me personally? Might come up with an answer. And then I'm going to ask myself again, okay, and why is that important? And why is that important? We do that 5 times. And that allows us then to really start from that center and work from the outside in. Because the why will really stand the test of time. When we focus on the what first, it leaves us very vulnerable and it puts us in a place of that performative box ticking diversity and inclusion. And discovering your why is really a process of discovery rather than invention. And we offer inclusive leadership training at Mildon. And this is one of the activities that we did on the day with all of the leaders there. We're going to figure out each of our individual why. Why is diversity inclusion important to me as a sales manager at Nestle, for example? Until I've got snaps on the brain, that was the first thing that came to my head. Or why is diversity inclusion really important to me as supply chain manager at Marks and Spencer's, for example? So figuring out our own personal why is key. Once we have that locked in, we can then focus on the how. So that's when you kind of figure out your strategy or your process. Then that will actually lead you to what you need to produce in order to actually make a difference. But the role of you all joining here today is to help to try and connect the dots for senior leaders around you at your organisation so they can also take more accountability and more ownership for diversity, equity and inclusion. So potentially could you or could somebody help facilitate the senior leaders this conversation to understand why this is important to them as an individual? If anybody has any questions on this, finding your why, facilitating this for other people or facilitating it to yourself, please do let me know. You're more than welcome to ask me questions as we move through. And great to have you here, Jeffrey. I've seen you've been in and you've dropped off, but hopefully you can join us again. What I'd like to do now is pause my talking for a little bit, fill up my drink because my throat is quite sore, and I'd like you to network and chat and get to know each other. There is, I think, here 10 participants. Some of these might be fireflies or screen recordings, but we will put you in breakouts just for 10 minutes now. And I want you to have a chat, get to know each other, perhaps talk about who you are, what you do, but also discuss what's the single most effective strategy that you have seen other people use to shift that EDI from being a HR project to something that's shared amongst the senior leaders. And even better, if you could talk about the results that you've seen. So, what strategies, what are some of the things that you've seen at your own business or other people's organisations that really help shift the dial from EDI being a HR thing to everybody's responsibility? If anybody needs to doesn't want to be in a breakout, please let me know. I will stop the recording for the breakout, so nothing that you share will be recorded. I'll do that now. Hi, everybody, welcome back. I'd love to invite you all back to the discussion. I have resumed recording, so we are still now recording the meetings, but we did not record the breakout rooms. But welcome back, everybody. I would love to hear from you in the last few minutes that we have before we wrap up. What are some of the things that came up for you? What are some of the strategies and some of the effective techniques to bring more senior leaders involved into diversity and inclusion? I can hear somebody off mute, but I'm not sure if they're talking.
It's gone very quiet. I was in a breakout group with Elaine, and we had
Mhm.
a really, really fantastic chat, actually, sharing experiences, networking, just basically talking about our practical experience of operating at various different levels in business, and how being an advocate for EDI can be really hard, and kind of just sharing that and acknowledging that, which was really nice, but also talking about some practical things that you can do um, around advocating for EDI, including, just a really simple practical thing that I did was including some HR partners into my leadership meetings, because once they're
Mm.
sitting there and they're part of the team, they're not seen as, oh, it's HR, it's HR's problem. They're,
Yeah.
oh, we want to talk about this issue. And actually, if you could give us a bit of advice, that will be fantastic. But these are our ideas, and this is what we want to do. And what do you think? And kind of collaborating as opposed to dumping it on HR, and role modeling for EDI generally around the C-suite environment, and being the person who ultimately calls it out most of the time, but feeling confident to have data as well as some good storytelling around, why it's not a good idea to say this or that, and perhaps it might even be illegal, and some
Mm.
of the things you might like to think about saying instead. So yeah, just some of that. And Elaine also had some great examples, but I'm not gonna signpost you to her in case she doesn't want to speak, so that's fine.
Thanks, Victoria. And I love what you said at the start there about sharing space with people who are passionate about diversity and inclusion, are used to being the ones sort of flying that flag. It's very affirming. And I think that is a great thing about growing your diversity inclusion network, is to be able to say, yeah, it gets
Mm.
really tough at times, and someone to say, yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
You can really challenge.
yeah.
I've had that too. There's a lot of value in that. And what I'm hearing, some of the successful techniques that you've seen used is just creating more spaces for collaboration. It doesn't feel like
Mm.
a us and them.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, totally. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you, Victoria. Thanks for joining. And is it Wilfred? Wilfred's left us now. It's been
Yeah, Wilfred's having
bored.
a snooze now, so he'll submit his ideas on the chat in a moment.
Wilfred's idea is always welcome. Thanks, Victoria. Who else haven't we heard from? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and ideas on this. If you're shy, you can use the chat. But if one more person could unmute, that would be great to hear from one more person before we wrap up. Maybe people are feeling a bit shy. If anyone's got any thoughts that they want to pop in the chat box, feel free. Um, we are coming to time, and I always like to make sure that my workshops, where possible, don't overrun and respect your time and your calendar. If there is a topic of conversation or something that we've teased or brought up today that you'd like to chat about privately or chat further, Toby offers one-to-one confidential conversations. So you can follow this link. I will pop it in the chat box for you now as well. Um, this is completely free. The spaces are quite limited, I will say that. But if you'd like to have a one-on-one chat with Toby, he has worked in diversity inclusion at places like the BBC and Deloitte, and worked with hundreds of organisations supporting them. If you've got a challenge or if you've got an idea that you want to put out and brainstorm, you're more than welcome to look at his calendar and book some time there. It should be in the chat box for you all. Um, I would just love to say as well, thank you everybody for joining me. Thank you, Victoria, for your kind words about my wedding. Thank you for having me here today. This is the first talk to action workshop that I've hosted and stepped in for Toby today. So thank you for having me. We'll be back next fortnight. It will be Toby there. And the topic of the next one that we will be looking at is the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and that's through an inclusion lens. So Toby and Mildon were a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team model. So we're going to be going through that. And in that, the topics we'll explore are trust, psychological safety, having constructive conflict with your teams, and building more accountability. All of that within your teams and in your organizations. So if that's a topic you are interested in, please do sign up for the next one. And if you have anything you want to talk about, either privately, via email, or having another conversation, you're more than welcome to use the chat box or connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to get to know you. I'm going to connect with you all now on LinkedIn. But have a great day.